Everyone settle down, please. We're going to start. So our friends will join us online from the IOI alumni corpus globally. Only.
This diversity in the course, and but thank you for creating a miracle every year, and we get this opportunity to have this access to people, to your authorities, and that you create this possibility to have the highlight of the core in spite of the difficulties. I know this time it was even more difficult than ever to have you all here. And this event in the for the course itself is a highlight for the course. And we feel very proud. And I also congratulate you on choosing the subject of the Ocean Nexus security. So that's what's going on. But my voice is goes with my sides. So I think I thought that at this moment and for the class, that a better subject than this, the issue of security, sovereignty, and sustainability. I think we, in terms of the global status of people, and particularly the UN system, and the expectations of the UN system is a great challenge at the moment. And I can only think that the Secretary General himself said multilateralism is in the abyss. And we see it. We see it, the poverty that is rising, the distortion of the in terms of the climate and the denials, of the suffering of humans. And so therefore the issue of sustainability, sovereignty, and security are paramount. And I hope the class realizes this and will include it in the future, in the challenges, and use this occasion to understand more carefully what it means, these words, and how we overcome the situation we see here. And particularly, I have a tendency to bring the UN in this because I spent my life serving in the UN, and to see how it is treated, what it is trying to do for people in poverty, in sickness, on the sea level rise, whatever. And we deny that we should do what we should do for for the future. I thank you for making this possible.
Thank you. So, Auni Behnam has, our honorary president, has always so eloquently put your finger on the core of the problem, that this is a people problem as well, a people issue as well. So, on your behalf and on behalf of the IOI, I thank you all for being here today, and that together we will examine the issues that come together, the nexus of security, sovereignty, and sustainability. We've got 6 excellent speakers from bringing different experiences to this event. So I think you're going to have a very interesting experience and an illuminating experience today. I would like to thank you all for being here. And I would like also to thank as well our colleague, Thomas Valletta, who is a member of the European Parliament. I am very thankful, we are very thankful that he sent us a video message, because as well as being a very competent member of the European Parliament, albeit a young one, he is also an alumnus of the IOI, and I believe his attachment to the topic shows. We have a short video of welcome from Thomas.
If the Union was a country, it would be the 7th largest economy in the world. And we are driving into a bankruptcy. Sometimes we seem to forget, but we know that the ocean connects all of us. It's also where many of today's challenges are being faced. We see tensions over maritime boundaries, growing pressure on resources, and the clear effects of climate change on coastal communities. And all of this reminds us that the ocean is not merely an environmental realm, but rather an interdependent space where environmental, social, and economic realities converge. What I learned during my time with the IOI is that we can't look at these issues separately. If we focus only on protecting national interests without thinking about the environment, we are risking to lose the very resources we depend on. And if we push for sustainability without recognizing the needs of the people, especially those whose livelihoods depend on marine resources, we actually risk overlooking the wider reality. Because effective ocean governance can only succeed when it adopts a holistic approach, and globally. And this is even more relevant nowadays when global cooperation is becoming more difficult. Issues like illegal, unsustainable, and unreported fishing, biodiversity loss, and climate impacts do not stop at borders. They affect everyone, and they need solutions built on collaboration and shared responsibilities. And that's why seminars like this one are so important. They bring together policymakers, researchers, and other professionals from different communities, and bringing different perspectives on how we can work together more effectively. And hence, I want to thank you all for your contributions and for being part of this conversation. And once again, I want to thank the IOI, not only for their work they continue to do, but for inspiring me and making me the person I am today, a politician serving the interests of a global ocean, one ocean. Hence, I wish you all a productive and inspiring session.
It's very heartwarming to listen to these words, concepts phrased so simply and so directly and so effectively. So our thanks go to Thomas for bringing the nub of the message so clearly to us. The next person to join us today is Professor Christian Bürger, who will give a scene-setting keynote presentation, a brief one. Christian is a professor of international relations at the Department of Political Science at the University of Copenhagen. He leads the Ocean Infrastructures Research Group and the Copenhagen Ocean Hub. He's also an honorary professor of the University of the Seychelles, one of the directors of the Safe Seas Network on Maritime Security, and a research fellow at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. So in a sense, the three main thematics of this seminar, I think you will be bringing together in a very interesting way. So thanks, Christian, for being with us today. Of course, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a true pleasure to address you here today. I hope you can hear me loud and clearly. Can you wave if that is the case?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. First of all, a big thank you for the introduction. And I want to introduce you a little bit to the research that we are basically doing from a maritime security perspective, looking into how and why we need an holistic approach to the oceans. And I want to start with a paradox that should trouble us all. In many ways, this year was a fantastic year for the ocean, and a lot of unprecedented things happened. In Nice, in June this year, thousands of scientists gathered for the One Ocean Science Congress, and we had the third UN Ocean Conference. Heads of states, activists, NGOs, and so on, all gathered to the Mediterranean coast. The European Union announced a €1 billion new ocean pact, and many countries committed to the new treaty, the BBNJ treaty, which will now enter into force next year. That is in many ways historic. However, in May, just a month before, something equally historic happened, and not many people paid attention to that. The United Nations Security Council convened at the ministerial level for the second time in history. Over 80 countries actually took the floor, and the UN Secretary General opened with what has become a new principle in maritime security discussions, in saying that without maritime security, there cannot be global security. The consensus actually among delegates and presentations were remarkably equally. Terrorism, piracy, overfishing, and so on were frequently mentioned. Now, at the same time, if you look at the Nice Declaration, there is no reference at all to security and peace. So we are looking at something that we call in our research the oceanic disconnect. This is not an administrative oversight. This is a problem that is rooted much deeper. And in an article published 2 years ago with my good colleague Felix Marlin, we argued that what we are looking here is a growing fracture between competing visions, institutions, and most centrally problem definitions. The question, what kind of problems do need to be addressed to resolve the ocean crisis? And we call that the poor blue paradigm. Because if you look into contemporary ocean discourses, there are 4 prominent ways of how we have started to discuss the ocean. The first one, to start with where I'm most comfortably, or where I'm sitting, is the paradigm of maritime security. And from that paradigm, the ocean is seen as a space of geopolitical contestation, of insecurity, and of threats. Very often, the solutions that we're looking towards are law enforcement solutions. They are military solutions very often as well, and challenges such as Somali piracy are a very good example for the challenges here. The second paradigm, equally familiar to all of you, is that of the blue economy. And here the ocean is largely seen as a resource frontier, a space of economic calculations, investment opportunities, but also sustainable growth. And our response here lies mainly in blue economy strategies, marine spatial planning, and the idea to third paradigm is that of ocean health. And here we are centering on nature rather than humans. We are thinking about the oceans as a complex web of ecosystems that require protection, restorations, and essentially science-based management. I find the notion of health very often revealing because it gives us an idea of the ocean as a sick patient that requires science-based medicine. The fourth paradigm in our setup is that of blue justice. And here the perspective is fundamentally normative, and the question is who benefits from ocean governance, who bears the costs, and who bears the risk. And very often that's a familiar story. Coastal communities and small island states can be at substantial disadvantage here. Now, you might have heard about each of these four paradigms. They are all four intellectually coherent in their own rights. The discussions on them is sophisticated. None of them is simply wrong or right. They rest on fundamentally different understandings of what is problematic about the current state of the ocean. And perhaps most centrally, usually there are different communities attached to each of these paradigms, which not very often are in close conversation with each other. And the gap between the discussions in Nice and the discussions in New York on maritime security are a very good indicator for that fragmentation. What is, however, deeply problematic about this fragmentation is that we are paying a high price for having, for being in such a situation. And I give you one example why and how this can be hugely problematic. Last year in the Red Sea, the Houthis attacked a ship, and we were very, very close to one of the most tragic environmental catastrophe of decades. And that was the MV Soyun. It carried over 150,000 tons of crude oil. It was struck and it was unable to maneuver. And it took actually several weeks for salvage companies to be capable to come in because the problem was not taken seriously enough. Now, all the conservation gains in the Red Sea could have eroded within hours if this ship would have sunk and the oil would have spilled. We are seeing equal problematics in other regions. Think about the eroding participation of Russia in the Baltic regional environmental governance system. Think about the consequences of the conflict in Ukraine for the environmental situation in the Black Sea. So these are all examples for how maritime security and the other ocean paradigms actually hang together. Now, why do I think that it is important to think with these four paradigms and overcome the ocean disconnection? First of all, I think once we are looking at the ocean through the lens of paradigms, we see that these disagreements are not primarily about competing interests or competing principles. Rather, they are about competing problem definitions. And once you start a discussion over competing problem definitions, that is actually much more tractable and it opens space for dialogue. And in that sense, a Coast Guard commander and a conservation director are not arguing about whether the ocean matters, but they are now can start arguing about what is the most problematic and what should be prioritized. Second, I think this line of thinking also leads us to a number of genuine synergies. And a good example is the idea to bring better together ocean observation data and what is called in maritime security circles maritime domain awareness. It is important to know that expanded maritime surveillance can be good for all four paradigms. It allows us to better track dark vessels, prevent crimes, develop the economy, ensure that environmental protection measures work. If you look into the history of the discussion of security versus other ocean governance concerns, one name crucially pops up, and that is the name of Elizabeth Mann Borghese. She quite famously argued in the 1990s that the integration of security into ocean governance has been one of the big oversights of the law of the sea process. And she made a plea that the starting point for us integrating security concerns into the ocean governance regime should be the Regional Seas Convention. But obviously, we are no longer living in the 1990s, and we have missed that window of opportunity in many ways. But I think Mann Borghese is still right. The Regional Seas Conventions are one of these places, one of these legally binding anchoring points where we can actually reconnect the four paradigms all together. Equally important are quite obviously seminars like this one here today, because it is absolutely vital that different practitioners from whatever paradigm they come actually sit together, because as it's often said, the ocean is connecting us and not dividing us, and that should equally apply to problem definitions and to different communities of practice. And I'll end here and thank you very much for your attention and wish you a very, very successful workshop today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian, for your very apt, very strong tour de force of the topics that underpin today's seminar. Thank you for joining us today, and I would like to invite the speakers for the first panel. Please take the hot seat, if I may, please sit down wherever you wish. So I will very quickly introduce the speakers. Today we have on one side, and Fenech, who's a partner, Fenech and Fenech advocates. Those in the maritime field are well aware of Anne's expertise. She heads the Marine Litigation Department, and her main area of practice is on aspects of marine litigation. Obviously, you have an extensive experience in disputes with international maritime operators, but I want to zoom a bit quickly through your extensive resume and focus on the fact that you are the president of the Comité Maritime International. You've an extensive experience with this. You've been listed in the Lloyd's list of 100 people, shipping industry's most influential people. And you bring to us today, you have a very long resume, but you bring to us today a very extensive expertise honed through years of practice in the maritime field, especially in the legal field. Our other speaker today is Giovanni Buttigieg. He brings to us a more of a flavor of the diplomacy, especially something that I find very interesting. You are the head of science diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this bridging capacity will come through in our discussion today. And finally, Alan Deydun, who is known to many of you here because you're a stalwart of our Ocean Capacity Development series for our alumni. you've got a background in marine biology, Alan, but very interestingly, you're also Malta's first and only ocean ambassador. So as well as the other fact of being the director of training for IOI Malta, you bring together a number of interesting backgrounds, which I think will be very useful to the discussion today. If I may start with some questions. Okay, I'll start with you, Anne. So from our presentation now, you're at the pinnacle of a career which has shaped legal frameworks that govern shipping, that cover maritime activity. In your opinion, how important has it been that legal certainty and harmonization across jurisdictions, how important are they nowadays when you see outside of contested waters, shifting alliances?
Thank you. You hit the nail on the head, Antonella. The unification of international maritime law. I mean, I have had the enormous privilege of operating in this space for 40 years now. And so now stop counting, but I think I can stop at 40 for 40 years. I'm also hugely privileged by the fact that I love what I do. And I think that's common denominator with everybody in this room. I think the ocean, the sea, has this tremendous ability of drawing within it people who love it. Now, whether we're lawyers, whether we're engineers, whether we're master mariners, whether we're environmentalists, whether we're diplomats, whether we're academicians, whether we're practitioners, this is a dynamic, this is a space which has its own specificities, and it's fantastic. Now, as far as the immediate question you have raised is concerned, the ocean connects, like Thomas Bayaga, who was really great. I really enjoyed listening to his youthful enthusiasm, and we need more useful representatives at that table, which actually legislates. We'll come to that in a minute. I think the nature of this beast, the maritime space, essentially affects ships which carry 90% of world trade. And of course, they are going to carry cargo from A to B. And typically, in every single ship carrying cargo or passengers or anything else for that matter, the probability is that you are going to have dozens of competing jurisdictions and laws which could possibly regulate an issue as and when it arises. Now, whether it's pollution, whether it's issues of sovereignty, whether it's attacks on the high seas, whether it's fraudulent registry, but we'll come to that later, hopefully. The entire, the number one wish list would be, wouldn't it be great if the laws of all these different countries, which will have a say in a particular issue, were as similar as possible? So, wearing the hat of the practitioner, it would be fantastic if, when an issue arose, we could look at one law in order to regulate this, common to all nations. That is from the very practical perspective as a practitioner. Wearing the hat of the Comité Maritime International, the entire raison d'etre, the reason for being of the Comité Maritime International is unification of international law. And it was in 1897 that three wise men got together and said, hey, we need to unify international maritime law. And consequently, the CMI was created. And what the CMI does is it, through its members, who are the National Maritime Law Associations all over the world, we have 60 members. Those 60 members are the National Maritime Law Associations, which in themselves have thousands of members. So, of course, the overall membership, well, it's running into thousands. But what we do is we say, look, what is the world What are the problems at the moment? Fraudulent registries, attacks on the high seas, pollution, environmental disasters, etc. Can the planet, can the world, can different countries benefit from a singular law that would regulate this matter? And that is where the CMI would then attempt to draft international convention, because we know that it is through international convention that we can interregulate and unify international maritime laws. That's what we do at the CMI. We get together, we decide that it is important to have a convention which would give countries the opportunity to ratify, thus unifying the laws of the various countries on a particular subject. And then, of course, it's where the diplomacy comes into the equation, because the CMI can draft. We are a bunch of practitioners. We are at the coalface. We know what the issues really are when the situations arise. So we can attempt to draft the convention, but then we need an international organization with legislative powers to turn it into a convention. And that's when we would present our work to typically one of the organs of the United Nations. It could be UNCITRAL, it could be UNCTAD, it could be UNIDROIT, it could be the IMO. We'll go there with our project. We will have to face the diplomats representing all the different countries, and we'll have to convince them that we need this convention. Sometimes they agree, sometimes absolutely they don't. But I learned a lot. I will come to it later. I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you very much. In fact, you have just pointed out to something. If anything, your speech was pro cooperation and anti-fragmentation. So I think we're on the same page.
Particularly on today's world, but perhaps we can come to that later.
Yes, that's a different topic, right? So this question obviously leads me to Giovanni, and I am very fascinated by the way your career has bridged your background in engineering and now your daily, work in diplomacy. So you've served in a number of roles, Giovanni. I've met you in New York, where you were Deputy Permanent Representative of Malta. Right now, you're Head of Science Diplomacy at the Ministry. Can you give us briefly, how has this experience shaped your view of this evolving relationship between diplomacy, sovereignty, rule of law, sustainability? Where do you see diplomacy bridging all these divides?
First of all, this situation reminds me of a proverb I learned in West Africa, that no donkey should bray after the lion has roared. Nevertheless, I thank IOI for organizing this event and for this invitation. One temptation every diplomat encounters, especially at the beginning of his active career, moving out of his desk at the ministry and start seeing the world. One of the biggest temptations is cynicism. I have to say that I'm not exception. Nevertheless, we cannot be stuck then, in order to be productive. So starting with diplomacy, I think diplomacy has served us and continues to serve us very well, especially when considering the alternatives to diplomacy. Now, several might opine that diplomacy is in a crisis, and this is not an unjustified remark, it's not an unjustified opinion. Nevertheless, it is important to keep in mind that this is not the first time, that the situation is not unique. In just 1 century, diplomacy had to endure 2 world wars, a dangerous Cold War, several other wars, colonialization, several bouts of genocide, which are all antithetical to diplomacy. But in every one of these situations, diplomacy prevailed and actually helped us come out of the abyss, to use your term. Moving to sovereignty, I think that the traditional understanding of sovereignty has helped us a lot in one way or another living together. Well, there have been breaches of sovereignty. Each one of them is very important. There have also been several threats to the breach of sovereignty. Nevertheless, if we consider that there are around 200 countries in the world, depends on how you count it, what you leave out. These let's call them incidents are few and far between by any measure. Coming to ocean governance, I think the emphasis has changed a lot. I think it has moved from discourse on sovereignty, on territorial limits, on exclusive zones, more into the domain of common interests, such as plastics in the ocean, such as the loss of marine biodiversity, such as the warming of surface temperatures of the ocean. However, there are some challenges connected to this, and they are mostly related to the nature of ocean governance, which is by its nature, it's multilateral, therefore it requires consensus or quasi-consensus, which means that every agreement is composed of very, very small steps, often diluted and trying to reach the least common denominator. This is exacerbated by weak enforcement and also by fragmented conflict resolutions. Okay, so you have some conflicts which go to the International Court of Justice, other conflicts which end up in front of ICLOS, in front of the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. We have a proliferation of tribunals, especially for commercial disputes, and this fragmentation. Of course, every one of these bodies has a role, but this fragmentation doesn't help. Nevertheless, I think the greatest danger for ocean governance, this seeping culture of non-compliance. Non-compliance erodes faith in international law and in multilateralism. There are other areas that maybe we'll have time to discuss later.
Maybe the second question. Maybe we can discuss them as well in the next round.
Okay.
Because thank you very much, Giovanni. I think you've given us a very good tour de force of the current situation that we are facing right now. And I will come back to this and ask you what you think we can do about it, but pleasure is yet to come. And thank you very, very much. You are both a scientist and an ocean ambassador. Your work has to bridge marine research, advocacy, and policy. The people in Malta know you as a very strong advocate. Tell us, in your opinion, how does this combination of roles, how can this possibly help navigate complex ocean challenges? Talking the science and the diplomatic engagement that Giovanni has so well presented. How does a background in such diverse areas shape how one can approach ocean stewardship in practice, really?
So, thank you, Antonella. I too obviously join my esteemed colleagues in thanking the IOI, even though I consider myself nowadays to be part of the IOI, but I have to thank the IOI HQ, okay, the headquarters, obviously, for setting up such a, IOI has always been ahead of the curve. So probably I'm confident that this type of discussions will become quite mainstream, hopefully, in the years to come. Nexus, I particularly like the choice of term for the title of this seminar, Nexus, the bridge. And I think it's one of the most difficult things for people to connect the dots. It's very difficult for people to see the bigger picture. If you look at the title, you have security, sovereignty, and sustainability. I think last year or the previous year, the title was quite similar on Nexus, but it was on this triple crisis, which is biodiversity, climate, okay, biodiversity, climate, and governance and no, I think biodiversity, climate, and there was another one, but anyway, it could be pollution, could be, but one might say when seeing all these, at least a prima facie, disparate, thematics. What on earth, what is the gel? How can you connect these, and so on? And this reminds me quite a lot when Malta took the rotating seat on the UN Security Council. One of its battle cries was about sea level rise. And there were countries, obviously, who objected to this because they said, listen, this is not the right forum. Sea level rise, has nothing to do with security, which is obviously completely wrong. If you look at what sea level rise is doing and what it will do at a faster rate, at a faster pace in the years to come, it will displace people in big numbers. And displacement of people of this big chunk of wars have been created by people moving in large numbers, obviously, because you have competition for resources and so on. And obviously then, I'm not a maritime lawyer, but there's the issue, the famous issue with the baselines. What will happen with the baselines if you have SLI? Okay, so if they are ambulatory, okay, so to borrow some terms from the legal field. But coming back to your question, I think we need a new set of skills nowadays. Even, and this goes deeper, it goes in our educational system. It's very difficult, I think, to eliminate the silo approach. That if a person was trained to be an engineer, was trained to be a lawyer, was trained to be a scientist, whatever, to have this set of skills to be able to transcend those boundaries, those silos, and to be able to speak and to address a team in the broadest manner possible. I think we have to teach and to train. I don't like teach, the verb teach, it's rather train those with whom we are entrusted, because I was going to say the younger generations. It could be older generations because lifelong learners, but we have to train this skill of wearing many hats. You have to be able to wear many hats because you need to be able to speak to as many audiences as possible. So just this morning, I was on social media and I have to eliminate this habit of going on social media early in the morning because then it ruins your day. It ruins your day because I'm still thinking about this serious post. Now there was, and some of you might have seen it probably, it's still, I'm still burning inside. When you get these famous social media platforms, one of the Maltese ones, okay? One of these famous social media platforms starts with an L, okay? And they were sort of glorifying this speech by an MEP, okay? A recent speech by an MEP, okay? I'm not going to mention countries here, you can look it up, but who was lambasting the European Parliament and the Commission for saying you are, on a mission to eliminate the combustion engine. Why are you doing this? You're not going to save the world. The ocean is full of plastic. You should deal with plastic, Why do you want to remove fossil fuels and so on? And the way you see the comments, this speech has one of many converts. So what are we doing? We scientists, we stay in the lab in our ivory towers, I couldn't help it, but I, put a comment in. Say, listen, because there were a lot of people saying, he's right, he's right. And you get this one thing leads to another. And that the biggest, in my opinion, not my just my opinion, the biggest threat, existential threat we have today is not climate change. Climate change probably comes second or third, don't know, in the top one. But for me personally, it is misinformation. Because misinformation, then, it goes in, it's an insidious threat, it goes in everything. It goes in health sciences. People's trust in vaccines, for example. Once you start questioning the credibility of science, we've had it, okay? So we don't need all our politicians to be expert scientists, but at least, I'm sorry, if you are in politics, if you are in policy making, you have to have a basic appreciation of science. a basic appreciation of science and a basic understanding of science. I'm sorry, it should be mandatory. It should be mandatory. Because otherwise it's useless speaking about evidence-based policy making, science-based policy making, and all these mantras we get, and then you get people at the European Parliament standing up like this guy, and going at attention against electrification of vehicles and so on and so forth. So this is a big challenge today, because if we lose the faith in science, then there's a multiplier effect. It goes down a domino effect. It leads to conspiracy theories. It leads to all these theories being peddled online and so on and so forth. So I'll stop there for now.
I know you're very passionate about the subject, and to be honest, I think you have a strong point to be made here, and I couldn't agree more about the importance of, opening people's eyes to the interdisciplinarity of this, I'm going to use a word that you didn't like much, but it's true, science-based policy making, all important topics. So I'm really glad you brought these to the table in our discussion today. And I wasn't planning it, but Alan's intervention has to lead to a question to you again, Giovanni. So, as head of science diplomacy, which I find is a very interesting role, how do you see scientific cooperation contributing to the resolution of these ocean-related challenges that you mentioned before? These are inherently transboundary, whether we're talking climate change, pollution, we talk about data sharing, we talk about maritime innovation. So what is the potential for science diplomacy to complement or even reinvigorate multilateral action and ocean governance? I think it's a very good question following on from what Alan said just now.
Science can provide us, or at least can offer us, innovative solutions to intractable political problems. What we refer to as science leapfrogging politics. Now, the effectiveness of this depends a lot on trust in science, and science that you can trust, which means science which is empirical, which is objective, and which is repeatable. Now, in the past, this was hindered due to genuine ignorance or due to general lack of knowledge. But unfortunately, we are living in a time where science is under an unprecedented attack. And this time it is for convenience, or rather for the inconvenience that we will have to go through. We have to listen to what science is telling us. And this is beyond, but includes maritime issues. So there were some examples mentioned already. With people attacking science about vaccines, about climate data, about the creation or the evolution of the oceans. And so science can propose to us solutions, for example, for the acidification of the ocean. But first, you have to believe that the ocean is undergoing this process. Science can tell us perhaps how we can mitigate the effects of coastline populations due to surface currents. But first, we have to believe that the deep ocean circulation is slowing down. Therefore, I think we need a pushback. We need a pushback in favor of science. And one way of doing that is by having a more science literate public and trying to push more science into policy.
Thank you very much. We will come back to that topic, I'm sure, even in the second fireside chat. But I would like to ask Anne.
Before I answer the question, can I say two words about this? Because I think this is all brilliant stuff. But I would like to suggest that we have this massive elephant in the room. And the massive elephant in the room is that all of us here are sensible people, I would like to think. We all agree that science is under threat. We all agree as to what we should do. But I think this is a massive challenge of and those projects to go back to their countries and convince their politicians to get off their political high horse and understand what needs to be done. Because we have a massive disconnect between what we all know needs to be done and what these people that we elect, wherever they are, all over the world, and on an international level, we all know that we're facing a major challenge, right? Don't want even to believe that science exists. You know, people representing countries who go to universities abroad, educate themselves, learn, know what's right and wrong, need to take an active part in their own countries at first to convince their politicians to do the right thing. I think so.
We're on the same page, yeah. Yeah, actually, you have almost preempted the question I have for you, because you, as an eminent legal person, we know your work. How can you, in your experience, with the lens you bring, the prism you bring to this, how does your work, how can your work intersect with this? How can a lawyer in maritime affairs help bring this about? You spoke very clearly about the work you do in preparation, but
Really
that the next step is for it to be implemented, for it to become law, for it to become accepted. So teaching, training has one part of the equation. From your part, in your opinion?
I think there's a very important role to be played by all the major players, a contribution to make. So whether it's the academicians, whether it's the practitioners, whether it's the implementers of policy, regulators and legislators. When we as lawyers come into the equation, is that I can say that perhaps I'm privileged because I come from Malta. We're in the middle of the Med, ecosystem of Gibraltar and Suez, and we straddle one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, plus we have the largest flag in Europe. So that means that on a daily basis, Antonella, I can tell you that my office touches an issue of an international dimension, which has a bearing very frequently on sovereignty and the oceans. Example, piracy. We spoke about piracy. We spoke about attacks on the high seas. Once you have a piratical attack on a vessel flying the Malta flag, then what the law of Malta has to say about it? How we try to relieve that situation of the piratical attack. I mean, very few people know, for instance, that when in 2008, Malta was considered as the last place which could be trusted with the passage of the funds which would be paid to the pirates in order for the ships to be released. Now, before anybody starts questioning the legality, of course, that could only be done once we got authority, judicial authority, to actually do that with the liaison with the tax authorities, with everybody else. But why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we actually touch these issues. When the Sunyon, which the professor actually mentioned, was attacked, and you have a risk of pollution, you have the human element where you have the crews, which were actually taken off the ship and taken on land. You have, the attacks on shipping in that way. You have the fraudulent registries. Today, we have a scenario where, because of the situation emerging from the imposition of sanctions, why do we have sanctions? We have sanctions to get countries to behave themselves, or we hope sanctions will have the effect of getting countries to behave themselves. But what is the direct effect of those sanctions on unscrupulous people who don't care less about what's right and wrong? And sanctions, so what they're doing is getting ships registered fraudulently. So they pretend they are flying the flag of various countries when they're not really registered in those countries, or they give rise to people who, out of their living rooms, decide that they're going to emulate the registry of another country and actually sell the flag of another country without the country knowing. Now, these are all maritime issues which we touch on a daily basis, which all touch on sovereignty. Flying the flag of a country. A ship, we know, flies the flag of a country, and it is an extension of the country's sovereignty. So you can imagine the massive problems that are going to arise when the flag on that ship isn't really representative of that country. Now, what do we try to do? Quite apart from assisting, giving emergency, literally first aid assistance to the scenarios as they arise, back to the CMI. At the moment, for instance, we know there is a very real need for the unification of guidelines, rules relating to attacks on shipping, on commercial vessels, in particularly when it comes to assistance to be given to crew members. This is a reality which we are facing today. So one thing we are working on, for instance, is guidelines on how various countries can treat these crew members, guidelines on fraudulent registries. We know that the IMO at the moment is working on these guidelines. So there is a massive connection between the practitioners and what we do, and how we try to bring these problems to the international table by suggesting conventions, but then really depending on the legislative bodies to agree that such a convention is required so that they can go down the route of creating a convention.
So again, all roads lead to defragmentation, lead to conversation, to dialogue between actors. So very important, absolutely. And I know we're here talking about this. I know the IOI training courses, which have been offered over so many years, trying to focus on this. We've made steps forward, and yet there's so much to be done. So I have the last question for Alan, because we can continue this conversation for a long time. So many things I want to ask. So, Alan, you've been a powerful advocate for ocean literacy. You have given us a very heartfelt plea just now, which seems to be echoed to all our speakers. Public communication, citizen science, people in Malta know you as a very vocal advocate of science, of course. In your view, and probably come back to this with great emotion, because we agree on this. How critical is public understanding to support the legitimacy of ocean governing decisions? How can engagement with communities and civil society, contribute to defragmenting all these issues we've talked about?
Obviously, this is essential. You cannot get a top-down approach, because you see, whenever you have top-down approaches, I don't know, a new regulation coming on stream and so on, and it's not well communicated to civil society, you always have a reaction. And we can see this even being reflected, in the rise of certain extreme political, groupings, in Europe and around the world, so, and all these conspiracy theories and so on. And you mentioned two very important concepts here, ocean literacy and citizen science. So ocean literacy, we all know obviously what literacy is. Ocean literacy, perhaps most of us know what ocean literacy is, but you would be amazed at the low degree of ocean literacy out there. So if you had to, I don't know, speak to most people, and you say, listen, what should we do to reduce carbon emissions or carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere? You'll probably mention, some of them would mention, most of them would mention, we should plant more trees. That's good. But when you tell them, listen, there are plants, there are habitats in the sea, like mangroves, like seagrasses, but we don't have mangroves, but we have seagrasses, okay? Which absorb more carbon dioxide than trees on land. So transplanting, even more seagrass meadows in the sea is a good nature-based solution to tackle this issue, that the ocean is our ally in fighting this climate crisis. So most people wouldn't know these things because you mentioned ocean acidification. When it comes to ocean acidification, we're still way behind to trying to break down the science and explaining it to the general public that the ocean is becoming acidic. Most people would sneer at you because they would say, so it means, if I put my hand in the sea, literally, it will be peeled off, the sea will peel off. And you tell them, listen, but the pH level, and I start my lecture on ocean acidification with our master students in this way. The pH of the ocean has gone down from 8.1 to 8 or 7.9 in the last 20, 30 years. And I was pause a bit to see the reaction, because I'm pretty sure that some of them would want to jump and say, so what? So what? A 0.1 degree and a 0.1 on the pH scale or 0.2. And then you say, listen, you still remember your secondary school science, that pH is a logarithmic scale, that a 0.1 decrease in pH is almost a 30% increase in acidity, and they say, yes. And they recall that they had learned that. So imagine somebody who has never been exposed to basic physics, chemistry, or biology, even at secondary school. The challenge that there is, Citizen science, let's finish on a positive note, at least. Citizen science is one ray of hope. The University of Malta, together with the IOI, has been involved quite a lot in citizen science. I would say we're the pioneers in citizen science in Malta. We have campaigns like for the alien fish, for the aliens, for the jellyfish, and now we have even more on microplastics and so on. And okay, citizen science campaigns are good at collecting scientific information. Now, even the old school scientists, who used to twitch their noses at citizen science, are agreeing that, you realize, because you see a lot of publications coming out, which are based on citizen science experiments. But it's not only that. I'm happy, very happy with the scientific data. Whenever a new species, a new alien species, has been recorded from Malta, and we get our name on it, we're proud, obviously, because I'm an academic at the end of the day. But I believe that the biggest contribution of citizen science is not that, it's the engagement with the public. Because every time you get a Facebook message, every time you get it, because it's mainly social media, even though you publicize the website, even you have to be patient and you say, listen, I have to go and reply to 15 reports every day. But every time you get a report on social media, through a fisher, through a diver, through somebody walking along the promenade, anybody who's remotely connected with the scene, and they say, I've taken this photo. Can you help me? What is your opinion about this? And so sometimes I just send them, I'm in a rush, I send a voice message, literally. They are happy because it's not just telling them it is Pelagia Noctiluca. You don't just give the scientific name, No, you give the context. Listen, this is a common jellyfish normally found at this time of the year and the weather. So there is an engagement, and you get people interested in science. They want to we get a lot of repeat visitors, let's say, call them like that. People who don't just send you a report once, but they keep sending you reports and so on. They start appreciating, and you say, listen, this species is new to our waters, coming from the Indian Pacific Ocean through the Suez Canal, okay? And this is, just to finish on this, to continue to what I was saying, one success story, I think, linking our three spheres, I think, okay, it's not perfect as an instrument, but I think, it's positive. My pet subject is that of alien species, okay, marine alien species. And shipping, obviously, is one big introduction pathway for it, because you have the world's largest canal, Suez Canal, which has no locks, unlike Panama Canal and so on. So it's easier for species to go in as well. But I think one important development was the introduction of the Ballast Water Management Convention. It took a long time because obviously we had to have a certain number of countries which ratified it, but it came on stream in 2017, and nowadays there is a set of things to try to mitigate the passage of alien species to ballast water, because as we're speaking, there's millions of tons of ballast water crossing from one part to the other of the world and the gazillion alien species in their ballast water, you know. So I think, just to stop here, I think, yes, that we need more and more ocean literacy campaigns, and citizen science is one of these ways to which we can, you know, make the wider public aware of the role played by the ocean in our everyday life.
Thank you very much, Alan. I would have loved to have chance for some questions, but we've had a really good discussion. So I'm going to throw you just a little bit under the bus, but you're good speakers, you can do it. I want, if you can give me each one statement, your impressions, or one summary sentence from our discussion today. In any order.
I think the takeaway, as far as this panel is concerned, the audience have been able to hear three very diverse views of three separate pillars, I can say, that have to come together with a view to creating something special. The creation of that something special has to be a focus in identifying areas which touch upon the ocean, which touch upon the maritime sphere, that can benefit from the unification of laws. And I would like to make an invitation to your students that if they can think of any particular area which would bring benefit, to which the world can benefit from unification, please write to the Comité Maritime International. And if we believe in that subject, I can promise you that we will consider it and we will take it up.
Very much. Now you have a challenge, Giovanni, a brief wrap up.
My remark would be inspired of the conversation today. I think the future is very promising.
Thank you.
We have been a bit negative, but I think when you see initiatives like this, and you see all these people from every corner, so many corners of the world, why are we still doing something to make things better? I think the future is bright, or at least I would say our jobs are guaranteed for a few more years.
Well, that's for sure.
We approach the future with optimism. Thank you. Giovanni.
I would end with just two appeals. One, for everybody, you know, to get engaged. So every time you see something which is, you believe, you know, passionately that is wrong, that is being publicized out there. I'm not speaking about, you know, a coffee side discussion between two people, because everybody's entitled to an opinion, you know. But when you have mass media, social media, where you're spreading that wrong, simple information, so get engaged and counter that, you know, counter that. So be engaged and choose, obviously, spend time to choose your sources of information. So be selective. So if you're going to subscribe, there's a lot of these news portals which allow you to subscribe for free to your information. Do your sieving very, very well and see what the agenda, because everybody has an agenda at the end of the day. See that you agree with their agenda at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish we could continue, but I know that the schedule requires the second fireside chat participants to come. Thank you very much to our speakers. This is my cue to leave the floor to the next panel. And I would like to invite the next three speakers and the moderator as well. So, Cosmin,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Please, take your seats.
Okay, everyone? Great. So, shall we begin with the second fireside chat? The speakers in the first fireside chat left us some pretty large shoes to fill. You've dealt, I think, perfectly with highlighting the complexities of the current ocean governance framework, but I couldn't have asked for a better panel to deal and go into breaking down even further those complexities by showing the need for inclusive leadership, the need for capacity building, and sustained cooperation across sectors. So, to begin on that, I have the honor of introducing Gina Panayotou, a maritime lawyer turned award-winning social entrepreneur, whose work spans law, environmental strategy, and impact leadership across the entire maritime sector. There's a lot more to go in your bio, Gina, but I think we can go straight to the question. So, based on your experience, you've worked across law, strategies on environment, sustainability, and governance, and most importantly, stakeholder mobilization across the entire maritime sector. How was this cross-sector experience? How was it shaped? And how did this shape your understanding of leadership and accountability in ocean affairs? It's quite clear from the first speakers that leadership plays a large role, especially with regards to young people and especially with regard to the future. And tell us a little bit what happens when priorities across sectors do not align.
That's a really good question. Firstly, thank you very much to the IOI for the invitation, to you especially, Antonella, for being here. It's fantastic to be among the students. I think the discussion earlier was very insightful and a lot of recurring themes of what you just asked, of course. And leadership is absolutely paramount when we're talking about ocean governance, about sustainability, about security. It really is the make it or break it deal of the conversation and of the situation and the future. And it's something that I talk about a lot whenever I talk about impact leadership. It's something I will come on to and I firmly believe in. But I think it's quite evident that the world is in crisis, right? I mean, according to the Alderman Trust Barometer, less than 41% of people trust government leadership and around 50%, I think, company CEOs. So that's less than the population. And if you think about it, we're not going to get out of this crisis if we're not trusting in leadership. I always use this example when I'm speaking, and I say, if there was, for example, a fire alarm today, and the person who was leading the evacuation process, less of half of us trusted in that person, it would have been a disaster, right? And it's the same when it comes to ocean governance and sustainability. So it's very important for leadership to rise up to the challenge. You asked also about conflicting agendas, and I mean, conflicting agendas are always going to be the case. And from there, I think arises a lot of misinformation, but let's not go very far. If we take the Maritime Net Zero framework at the IMO a few weeks ago, it was a complete disaster because of conflicting agendas, of course, and what some leaders believe and others believe. So it became a very political forum. But I think the key there is always to facilitate collaboration between stakeholders and inclusive discussion where you're actively listening and participating and being very proactive in these discussions on how you move the needle forward. Because as I mentioned earlier, and just to give a bit of context of what I'm talking about when I say impact leadership, there's a whole theory that I usually go into, but obviously we don't have the time. But there's a lot of problems in the world out there. I mean, even the sustainability development goes along, there's 17 of them, and nobody can be working on all of them. So impact leaders are really the people who are going to identify what matters the most, but also where they can have the most impact, and kind of make sure that they're opening the pathways and the platforms to create those dialogues and focus, make that their North Star and focus and deliver on that.
So I'm seeing that basically it boils down to trusting in leadership and grounding everything into collaboration. And as well, I think you've brought to the forefront a little bit the issue of accountability as well across these actors and determination to cooperate, because that is an intrinsic need to any negotiation.
Yeah, and just to quickly add something on that, I mean, especially in this day and age, there was talks on social media, of course, and everybody has a voice on platforms, so being accountable and transparent is a very important part of trusting the leaders that you see, right? Because they may be saying one thing, but in this digital world, within seconds, you can really like find out what the reality is or conversations spark. So transparency and accountability are also very key parts of this impact leadership and the leaders that the world needs now.
Thank you very much, Gina. Always a little bit nerve-wracking being the first speaker, right? But I would like to take your concepts and dive even a little bit deeper and continue with the theme of cooperation and leadership by asking a question to Rebecca, who is head of the Office for Knowledge Exchange at CMT and director of IOI Germany. Her work focuses on improving the interface between science, policy, and practice. Rebecca, your work spans knowledge exchange, capacity development, and ocean literacy in many regions, and especially in Asia and Africa. I know you were in Senegal just a few days ago. Maybe you can bring a couple of stories from there. And basically, in your opinion, how does this shape your approach to building leadership and cooperation from the grassroots in today's increasingly fragmented international landscape? And also, what challenges and opportunities are most salient from your vantage point spanning all these regions?
Thank you, Cosmin. And I also like to thank Antonella and Cosmin and the whole IOI for this invitation and my panelists for the nice I would like to stress is the importance of capacity development and networking and knowledge exchange for effective ocean governance, especially in this fragmented world that we are discussing here, and the already mentioned information crisis. And you were asking for challenges, and I would like to highlight the persistent equities of groups, often women or indigenous groups and states, low and middle income countries who have limited or more limited access to knowledge, data, tools, and decision making. So I think it's something that we all need to be aware of and address. Another issue, and that builds on these inequities, is the deficit of trust that was already mentioned. So this is something that is challenging. Furthermore, we have touched upon the fragmentation and working in silos. And I think for building leadership and capacities, we can coordinate better and work better and pull this on the same string towards building a sustainable future. And let me say, for science, it's also that we are addressing competing agendas. So as scientific organizations have to ask themselves, do I rather focus now on excellent research on the next Nature paper, or will I invest resources, for example, on training the next generation? So this is something that scientific or research organizations have to deal with. This is being questioned. How is impact being, or research impact being assessed, for example, by the Coalition of the Advancement for Research Assessment. So hopefully things will be a bit different in the future. It's also an opportunity. Lastly, one of the largest challenges, I think, is funding, of course. So these areas are already chronically underfunded, knowledge exchange networks and training, and it adds up on the current trend where funds are being moved away from climate and environmental issues towards defense. And priorities by the EU, and thanks for housing us, is in the future to build, to focus on competitiveness and innovation. So also away from focusing on climate and environment. But we do have also a lot of opportunities that you mentioned. So there's a rise in people who advocate for blue justice and more inclusive processes. There's also highly motivated early career ocean professionals who also advocate for changing business as usual, and the rise of approaches that support co-design and participation that already mentioned. So we need to listen to people, to their priorities, understand context, and build solutions together instead of importing solutions from somewhere else. And maybe just lastly, one point, one opportunity are networks. And I think what IOI does, or we also at Valletta do, is to train early career professionals, and they spend some time with us, they learn, and then they go back to their home countries, but they stay connected in a network. And this is kind of a fabric or an architecture that also supports multilateralism and that we can build upon.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. You highlighted a little bit of a self-feeding loop, right? Where you have the persistent inequalities, which leads to the deficit of trust, which leads in its own to the lack of opportunities, and we've turned back around. I am seeing the issue of deficit of trust coming back again. Alan mentioned that, you mentioned that. Maybe there is a webinar in here on a lot to speak about. But most importantly, Rebecca, you have mentioned the importance of the next generation and of early career ocean practitioners and how they might bring us a clue to the fragmentation that we're talking about. And we have an ECOP right on this panel, Ms. Cristina Chobotario, who is today with us as the representative of this year's Malta training program, class of 2025. Cristina holds degrees in law and a master's in global public policy and has experience ranging from marine conservation to corporate governance and international advocacy. So Cristina, drawing on your experience, both professional and with the course and the CS program, how has this experience shaped your understanding of the challenges and opportunities in ocean governance? What would you like to say to the next generation, and especially to the ECOPs following us online today? And lastly, what concepts or discussions have resonated with you most strongly?
Thank you for the question, Cosmin, and thank you for giving me this honor to speak on behalf of the 2025 cohort. And continuing the issue of trust, I will bring a personal insight and even a deeper perspective on trust. It's about trusting ourselves, because I wouldn't have been here because of the lack of trust I had in myself to actually be capable of doing this course. And if I didn't meet an alumni from the IOI, Natasha Valletta, I wouldn't be here, because I was like, no, but this is for like serious people who already have experience. What do I do here? I'm an ECOP. I have no experience in ocean governance. I just went a few months in Indonesia and I'm calling myself an ocean governance professional. It was so complicated for me to actually think that I have a place here. And coming here, meeting with all these people, I just realized that I should be here. No, I should be with all these scientists, with all these more mid-career professionals to learn from them and trust in myself that I'm capable to deliver more after them. After them to be the next generation that will actually go and continue the work they do. And from a more professional perspective, what I've seen as a global governance professional is that the usual global governance issues that we have in other fields, in security, in food security, and cooperation in terms of education, it's all of them they come into ocean governance. We see the same discrepancies, the same political agendas, the same, oh, I don't want that, no, it's my sovereignty, no, it's my territory. But can you actually have sovereignty on the ocean? Okay, you can on the ground put a line, this is my part and this is your part, but when it's talking about oceans and sea, you cannot say, oh, but this water is mine. Because one day that water went there, the other it's in the other place. So the concept of sovereignty in ocean governance is so abstract. It's even more abstract than the concept of sovereignty on the territory, on the land. So we have to rethink, and we see it is in the BBMG and the High Sea Treaty that we cannot say, oh, this is my piece in ocean governance. And we have to think about it as a global public good. You know, in public policy, we love this idea of global public goods. And we usually, our biggest issue is that we have free riders. We have free people which will exploit these public goods. And we need to build lighthouses that will actually protect these public goods. So I hope, you know, that after this IOI training course, I'll be able to like build these lighthouses, because now I have more questions than answers. You know, like I will actually start the work of doing and implementing what I learned here and build those lighthouses, or at least build the foundation or put the next stepping stone to the global governance of the oceans.
Thank you. You can give a quick way to the camera because Natasha is online. I saw her.
Natasha.
Thank you very much. Building lighthouses, I think that's already a little bit of a golden statement right there. And the lighthouse a little bit goes back to the networks, to the stakeholders. And Gina, to go back to your experience on cross-sector dialogues and how to mobilize said stakeholders. How do you see this engagement between them, including private sector, youth, and civil society? How do you see this being better integrated into ocean governance and assist us in dealing with the fragmentation of the fragmentation theme of this seminar? Basically, from your experience, what formats or practices have you found as most effective in translating these complex goals into meaningful action, as Rebecca mentioned, and as Christina also highlighted?
Meaningful action is always, so critical in every discussion that we have, because there's a lot of talks and there's conferences happening around the world, and always people say, okay, but when are we moving from what we've decided to take in action? So it's one of my favorite questions, and I've been quite lucky to have worked through Oceans Arena with multiple stakeholders, from the IMO to private stakeholders to startup communities. So it's given me quite a good understanding of how all these stakeholders can come together and be brought together. I will touch on ocean governance, but I think the principles are always the same, right? There's three things that I can list down. So the first, and it was discussed a lot today and in the earlier discussion, is awareness and impact communications, especially when it comes to the oceans. My main focus is the shipping industry. And when I started this journey of doing sustainability and ESG strategies in shipping 6 years ago, whatsoever, oceans were not factored in the sustainability journey of a shipping company, which I found so strange, because at any given time, there's around 50 to 60,000 ships navigating the oceans. It's technically the headquarters of our industry. So not factoring in ocean health and ocean governance in the sustainability strategy was quite unusual to me. So I started advocating and trying to raise the awareness of how it matters. And that brings me on to the importance of awareness and impact communication, because people need to understand why this is important on the one hand, but also what the role is and how you can be a part of it. Whatever stakeholder you are, so if you're a private stakeholder, if you're an organization, if you're a training center, so awareness is quite important. And luckily, I think we've seen a bit of a shift towards ocean understanding, and this practice becoming more prevalent, especially in the maritime world. This year's theme for World Ocean Day was our ocean, our obligation, our opportunity. We saw the Secretary General of the IMO going into schools and launching a campaign on ocean awareness. So awareness and impact communications, helping people understand why the ocean matters and how they can have a part in the governance process is quite important. The second one, which is very, very critical, and I am seeing it increasingly, is in large forums, UN forums like COP or the Oceans Conference of the UN, our Ocean Conference, even the IMO Innovation Forums, having youth participate from different countries from around the world, from less developed countries, from small island states, and bringing them together and making them, one, a part of the conversation, because it means that they're exposed to what matters are discussed, they understand what challenges are also faced around the world, but it also helps inspire them and understand better how they can bring it back to the local communities. Because if they're not in that place, part of those discussions, you're missing out on that field. And as Christina said about being in this course, you're around like-minded people who share the same vision. So you learn, you get inspired. So it's very important to kind of make sure there's ample representation of that in these big forums. And the last one, but not least, of course, is the training and education and capacity building. So things like what we are doing here. The IMO also funds a number of workshops in less developed and small island nations, for example, on biofouling. So it's helping the local talent not only be aware of the issues of the legislation, but also giving them those practical tools on how they can create an ecosystem locally. So that's a very big part of having, those practical tools in place. So it really is, as I said, the three things for me is awareness and impact communications, being part and visible of this international kind of forums, but also the capacity building and training. And just bringing it back again to what I said about impact leadership earlier, which is something that I'm a huge advocate of. If you follow these 3 steps for the different stakeholders, then they have a very clear vision on where they can make the most impact, whether you're an organization or a company or a training center, or each and every one of these persons in this room, there is an impact leader in you, there really is. So finding where you can make the most impact and just following that and taking bold action towards it is, I think, the key in kind of bringing everybody's passion together and where they're most strong to make and solve all of these challenges that we are facing.
Thank you. Very strong words. And I think your points on inclusivity, impact communication, and basically translating strategy into tangible impact really underscore how governance shouldn't be top-down. It should be participatory and ultimately grounded in the real-world dynamics that we're dealing with.
It's just if you allow me, it's very important. I see it in organizations. I work a lot with the private sector also. So you need to bring the people with you. It's a change management process. It's a change mindset process. So you need people from the bottom down to be involved in this process, to understand it, be inspired on where they can have the most impact and have a role in this to drive it forward.
Thank you. And I'm guessing for that, we need equity, right? And opportunity as well, equality of opportunity. And I think that brings us back to Rebecca. Basically, as conversation on sovereignty and security absolutely dominates the global ocean agenda, how do we ensure that the issues of equality, particularly around access to knowledge and training and decision-making, how do we ensure that these are not sidelined? And also, what strategies would you recommend in helping ECOPs succeed and also bringing these underrepresented voices to the forefront? Sorry, I think I squeezed like 3 questions and I wasn't sure.
I hope I can answer all of them. But maybe to stress what you said. So if security and sovereignty are on the ocean agenda, equity is maybe kind of can be a casualty. So I think it's important to reframe equity as the foundation of security, and I'll get to that in my intervention. First of all, I wanted to raise, and sorry for adding to the challenges that we're dealing with, but wanted to add something that scares me a lot. This is the rise of anti-feminist narratives and movements, especially online. So you see systematically women being insulted and silenced in social media. And these are female leaders, these are women in science, these are all women who are speaking out. And I think this is not only targeting women, but also undermines, as we already discussed, the trust in evidence and expertise. but erodes also democratic norms and threatens inclusive decision-making. So probably you all know about a couple of women who stepped out of the public already due to these initiatives and what is happening online. And I think this is something that is overarching and has not been touched upon here, which adds to this information crisis that I already mentioned. But you were asking for strategies. So what I would like to see is that we are protecting and amplifying female voices. So this can be done through gender responsive training, putting women into leadership positions, but also creating safe spaces when we negotiate. And as mentioned, we need to bring women into leadership positions. And I want to make a case that there is evidence that women tend to prioritize security and stability and dialogue. And we do have cases where women in leadership positions in fisheries, marine conservation, or climate adaptation projects have led to more secure and sustainable outcomes. So I would argue a case that let's bring more women into leadership. It adds to the security of our futures. And also, we already discussed making access to knowledge and tools and decision-making through inclusive processes and investing in early career ocean professionals. So they need visibility and mentoring, and they need to have hands-on practice. So negotiating and also being equipped and building resilience towards these anti-democratic, anti-science, and anti-feminist narratives. And maybe adding that we also need to explicitly address training needs in this online environment, this hostile online environment. I think this is something that colleagues or young colleagues have approached me, that there is at the moment not enough training for them to do so. So in the end, I wanted to make one more point, that ocean governance is built on cooperation and trust and science, and all these movements are targeting these issues, so anti-science, anti-feminist, and anti-democratic movements. So I think we must address those, and as mentioned in my introduction, that we need to strengthen equity as the foundation of security.
Very much. Basically, as you said, we need to take equity from the casualty to the actual foundation that keeps everything together. You've mentioned a little bit on the narrative against women. Gina, you have been voted for about 6 consecutive years as one of the top women in shipping. Would you like to add a few more words on the challenges?
Yeah, I'm actually very happy that you brought the topic of gender equality up. I've also been a part of an association called WISTA, so it's a Women's International Shipping and Trading Association. We've recently established one in Malta. It's a global forum for gender equality, and it also has a consultative status at the IMO, where we have an important part. We're an important part of these discussions and decisions. I think what I like to say at this is, like, we've got so many challenges while we're building this sustainable future. It goes without saying that turning against women is a problem, but what we need to understand is, like, we need talent to solve these challenges that we have in every industry beyond ocean governance. And excluding 50% of the population or even attacking it is not going to get us to where we need to be. Talent is what will innovate, is what will come up with the solutions. So it doesn't even make sense on a business level or on any other level to exclude 50% of the population based on gender. So I think initiatives that target that, and I'm very happy to say, in fact, the biofouling workshop that the IMO did was a capacity building training for females in less developed regions. So giving them the tools, depending on which country they're in, helping cultivate and build that talent, but also ensure their safety and that they're well represented, whether they're serving on board or in offices or whatever role that they choose to be, is a very important part of ocean governance and beyond. I mean, you've already, of course, mentioned that it's proven that leadership has a different kind of approach when you're looking at security and stuff and below, but it's also, a great opportunity, as I said, to tap into for women also as an opportunity to see this as careers and this ecosystem of building up even startups and entrepreneurship. So it's a great way through ocean governance and the sustainability goals to give opportunity to women. But also for us, it's very important to make sure we're cultivating that talent and there's inclusive dialogue in everything that's being discussed. So yeah, for the ladies in the room, we do of course have male members, but WISTA is definitely a platform you should, if you're looking into the wider maritime space, it's from students onwards to professionals. So please make sure to maybe check it out. There's a lot being done on having it for women, having a stronger voice in the industry, from networking to capacity building.
Thank you very much, Rebecca and Gina. I think you've done a tremendous job bringing home the idea that capacity development must go hand in hand with a sprinkle of systemic change, right? And that systemic change and systemic reform brings us back to Christina. From your perspective as an early career ocean professional, do you think that there are specific gaps or areas where young professionals are still not meaningfully engaged in advancing inclusive and resilient ocean governance? What avenues do we still have to work? And that's important as well to the work that we do at the IOI. We want to help mentor the future generation of leaders.
So I think what usually ECOPs are, not ECOPs, but early professional careers are perceived like is that they are a liability. They are not trained and they are not having the experience needed, but they are also not the beginners, so we cannot like put them to do bring me a coffee or something like that. And I've seen this because I worked in corporate governance, I worked in law offices, I worked in many different environments, and I was usually seen as liability that, I cannot put you do this because you do not know how to do it, or just do this translation. And I'm a very good legal professional. So I think speaking to like maybe more mid-career to senior career professionals, you have to look at us, ECOPs, and even like fresh graduates, you have to look at us as an investment to the continuity, and actually that will bring the resilience we need in ocean governance, making us capable by doing that, by making us do things, by putting us in those uncertain circumstances that we might not be trained already, but we will discover, we will adapt, we will learn from that experience. We had the Caribbean simulation, we had the policy making simulation on Friday, and those for some of us in the room, that's completely new. We were never put in that kind of situations. I was, because I'm in the legal field, in the public policy field, but some of us in this classroom were never into a policy decision-making process. And seeing that in a controlled environment like the IOI, it's actually very good, but because when you're going back, when you have the opportunity to actually get involved, in your local community, in your government, whatever you do, you will actually have the courage and the trust in yourself to pursue what you learned here. It's not going to be the first time you're holding a speech. This is not the first time, I'm in a panel, but I've never been in such an important panel. I was like, there was some colleague in front of me or something, but I have that preparedness to like speak in front of a public. If this would be my first time speaking in front of a public, I would probably not be able to speak because what would I say, And another concept that really, really resonates with me is ownership. Giving people ownership to actually do the things, because I've seen it working with people in Indonesia, with local community. I've seen it around Europe, working in European governance with both Europa. It's a pan-European political party. It's a massive work that's being done to like grow the integration of the European Union, I've seen people working for free. I've been working for free for so many years, but not because I was looking for something, but because I really believed that I was owning what I was doing. And seeing that ownership in people sometimes is more important, and it's your thing. You're not going to give it up, even if it doesn't make you money. It's your thing, and you are going to work for it, even if you're poor by choice, let's say. But yeah, I'm wishing out to be given more ownership to the things that I will have to do in the future from the senior positions.
Thank you very much, Christina. And I couldn't have wished for a better panel to build on the excellent foundation of the first fireside chat. Thank you very much. I had prepared a little bit of a conclusion, but I think we'll share the conclusion together. Basically, would you like to leave our online participants and as well our distinguished guests with just a few words, a quick takeaway, a distillation of your overall message? No particular order, whoever would like to start. Looks like a trip.
Yeah. I think because this is such an important topic, and I mean, we're also passionate about it. It comes down to also what I said, and I think it resonated in the earlier panel and in the discussion here. It is about the confidence within you and what you said, and really finding what you feel you can have the most impact on, believing that, and have the confidence to really develop your voice, shape your voice, be present, be visible. I think that's very important, because no matter how small you think you are, or if you shouldn't be in this forum, so you feel, the imposter syndrome building up, everybody at any level has the imposter syndrome to some extent. So I think it's just very important for us individually to find that voice and really use it. And in a way, I know social media can be a curse, but on the other hand, it can also be a very powerful tool. We live at a time where everybody can have a very strong opinion voice. So really using that, I think, to kind of lead on this agenda, put out the right information and make an impact.
I would probably say a similar thing and say be bold and get engaged, but also to you as fellow students, I think it's good to support each other in a professional network, and I wish for you to all take care of each other.
For me, I think I have more of a, I want you, if you're a policymaker or a lawmaker, go into the labs, go diving, go on the beach, go look at the sun, go look around yourself. And if you're a scientist, if you're all day with your eye on your computers, finding the best research, go into the fancy cocktail parties and talk with the politicians, talk with the legal people, talk with them, connect with them. Even if you don't know what you're doing there, even if you don't have the clothes, just try to do it. Because connecting people like me who are so well trained in policy with science and connecting science to the diplomacy and to this fancy cocktail nights like we had yesterday, that's actually more important than any article that we've written or that's very important, but any other things are come next. So go outside and connect the dots.
Thank you so much. So we have confidence, ownership, and networking as our takeaways for today. And I think in very simple words, we can distill that even further to the fact that it's always all about the people. And we need people to be empowered, informed, and ready to take the next steps and to bring that impact to the forefront. And I thank you very much for being with you.
Thank you very much to our speakers. I really enjoyed listening to this, wasn't it? Brief comment maybe between us to wrap up the two chats. What do you think of it?
I have to be very honest, I am going to steal a lot of these keywords and I think of 5 or 7 other webinars. The lighthouse metaphor, and I think I further understood just how important it is to network, to go out there, and to make sure that you implement the impact that you are capable of as an ECOP, at least in my case. And with that, I give the...
As I see it, the big thematic of these two panels was, I think at the end of the day, communication and dialogue. Whether it's we're talking social media, whether we're talking diplomacy, whether we're talking states to states, whether we're talking mentors to ECOPs, whether we're talking in the creation of leadership. I think a lot of what we have here is a breakdown as well in communication, in understanding joint goals and joint needs. So I think this will be our word for us to look ahead to the future with more people talking to each other in better ways.
And I think what we need for that communication and networking, we need the lighthouse in the background of...
We're going to have a webinar on lighthouses, right?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers. The event isn't over because, as always, we give the last word to our class representative, and we have a message from you, right? And I would invite you to come up here and read it. The MEP, Thomas Bayada, who sent such an encouraging message earlier, has kindly agreed to receive your message and to pass it on within his channels within the European Parliament and the EU. So rest assured that we will make sure your message gets to him and then beyond. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And it is an honor for me to be in front of you and to deliver this 2025 class message. So this letter, it is addressed to Thomas Bajada. I'm writing to you as a participant at the International Ocean Institute of Malta, presently participating in the 20th training course on regional ocean governance. This globally recognized program brings together early and mid-career professionals from across our globe, focusing on Mediterranean, Black, Baltic and Caspian Seas, each of them having different governance frameworks, environmental regulations, and cultural approaches to ocean management. Despite these profound differences, we discovered that when genuine communication channels are established and cooperation is prioritized, even people with opposing interests can find common ground and work together towards shared ocean stewardship. The ocean knows no borders. As the currents that feed marine ecosystems in one nation's water flow seamlessly into another's, also the challenges facing our seas, such as pollution, overexploitation, climate change, exceed the jurisdiction we have drawn on maps. This interconnected reality demands an equally interconnected response. We need governance beyond administrative boundaries that binds together nations, institutions, and international bodies in common purpose. This experience as IOI participant has taught me that the challenges facing ocean governance are not unmanageable. The European Ocean Pact, adopted in June 2025, represent an ambitious vision for coordinated ocean stewardship. However, as I study the practical realities of regional ocean governance, I observe a critical gap. The implementation of this pact will fail without institutional mechanisms for continuous communication and genuine transboundary cooperation. My course has revealed that fragmentation persists across governance levels between member states and among sectoral actors, not because policymakers lack commitment, but because the structures enabling coordination are deficient. Your Ocean Pact represents a pivotal step by unifying fragmented European policies under a single strategic framework. Yet European waters represent only a limited share of our ocean. The vast majority lies beyond national jurisdiction, claimed by no single state, governed by international protocols, and function only when nations choose to cooperate transparently and in good faith. This sobering reality illustrates why isolated actions, however ambitious, cannot secure our ocean's future. Effective communication channels must facilitate more than bureaucratic information exchange. They must foster shared understanding of competing interests, build trust where it is fragile, and create forums where scientific evidence guides policy consensus rather than economic convenience. Furthermore, cooperation must include those most vulnerable to ocean degradation: island nations, coastal communities, and developing states whose maritime sectors sustain livelihoods yet lack capacity to implement complex regulations. Capacity building and technical supports are not peripheral concerns. They are prerequisites for inclusive governance. Even when developing nations feel excluded from decision making and unable to comply with international frameworks, cooperation collapses. I urge the Commission to deepen channels of communication at every level between EU member states and third countries, between regional seas organizations, between government agencies and scientific institutions, between industry stakeholders and conservation advocates, NGOs and community as a whole. Institutionalize regular multi-stakeholder forums, support bilateral and multilateral agreements that create binding commitments to joint monitoring, intelligence sharing, and coordinated enforcement. Strengthen the European Commission's role as a bridge builder in international maritime governance. Our generation inherits ocean damaged by fragmented policies and weakened cooperation. But we also inherit the structures needed for transformation: the European Ocean Pact, the UN SDG 14, and emerging frameworks for international collaboration. These instruments will yield transformative outcomes only if accompanied by genuine, sustained communication and cooperation, not as afterthoughts, but as the beating heart of ocean governance itself. The ocean's future depends upon our willingness to act not as isolated actors, but as a global community bound by shared responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, I'll maybe say quite a word. So first of all, I want to thank all the people who have joined us today, whether it's online or in person in the class, for your attention, for contributing to this, our speakers especially. A lot of very interesting perspectives, always good to hear this different input from our 6 experts, and I count you already as one of our experts, so you've been promoted up. But yes, important topics were discussed, and important, maybe even not just challenges, but even opportunities highlighted. So I thank also the class representative here for such a good message on behalf of the class. It will be forwarded, and we will also place it in our IOI Informa, which is disseminated to more than 8,000 people worldwide. So your message will go far. Thank you all of you for your attention. I apologize very much that we didn't have time for questions, but I think that during the next part of the program, which is also a favorite, it's our working branch, I'm sure you can interact a lot with your questions and with the speakers here. So thank you all for being here, especially the people online, and bon appetit to the rest. Okay.